I'm Peter Artali, and I'm here with my friend Ernie, and we are here to talk about, it was Ernie's idea, our friend Joe Manueli, who passed away 26 days ago now. And we've come up with this little idea of kind of reminiscing about all the things that happened in past events. Ernie knows him from when you were small kids, right?
Right. Since, Peter has knew Joe since high school, when we all went to high school together, Paramus Catholic. I know Joe since we were in the same kindergarten class. So for me, it goes back 60 years. So we thought we'd share some of the each of our experiences with Joe over the years. Some of it might be in the way of topics that either of us have talked with Joe over the years, and maybe some rambling because our discussions were somewhat rambling, but touching on different topics. But how we got to that point, and we thought it might be of interest to those of you who love Joe the way we did, and so let's do it.
And we came up with a good title, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All the Joe you need to know.
No, more Joe than you need to know.
Is it not more Joe? More Joe.
Come on, get it straight. More Joe than you need to know.
It's more Joe than you need to know. It's an even better title.
Even better.
All right.
Let's go.
So, you've been friends with Joe, or you knew Joe way back from when you were in kindergarten.
True. We actually weren't in the same kindergarten class. There was morning, afternoon, and he was in the, and this carried through until 7th grade. He was the end of the alphabet, M to Z. I was the beginning of the alphabet, A to L, so C, so I was always with the last names that began with the beginning of the alphabet, and that was true both in public school, which is kindergarten, Euclid Avenue School, and the only reason I went to Euclid Avenue was because we lived for a short period of time on Franklin Avenue, which is where Joe.
So Joe lived down.
Joe lived on Franklin, and when I used to discuss that with him, he was like, well, I don't. Really? You were on Franklin? Because everyone knew me as being the other 2 blocks away, and if I was 2 blocks away, I would have been on the other public school for kindergarten, Lincoln Avenue School. But I was actually in that same school, so we had, when we would chat about it, we would have, similar memories about it because we were in that same class, and it's probably other than the Kennedy assassination, just about the earliest memory.
Right.
We're talking, the early 60s, so this would have been 64. And he lived on the one side of the boulevard, and that's why I didn't know him, or I didn't hang out with him, when we were small. And Euclid was at the far end, so we probably walked, just under a half mile. But
you shared a lot of things. You had the same teachers. You had the
same teacher. We had Mrs. Nixon. No relation, like I said, as far as I know, but she was a lovely woman. She taught there for many years, and we used to remember that other than Mrs. Nixon, the only person we remembered, and we don't know his name, was the custodian who used to hang out half the time and be there for show and tell and do stuff. And I don't know how clean the school was because he was always in the kindergarten, but we both remember that. And he used to show stuff from outside, and Joe remembered this. The school was surrounded by trees, like chestnut trees, with depending on time of the year, the chestnuts, and either they would with a little coating, spiky coating, and then the other ones with the pods on them.
Well, that was one thing Joe was good at, was he knew every
exactly
name of every tree and
right. So
and everything.
It was a recollection of his back then, and I said, "Oh yeah, I remember." And that was thanks to the custodian who used to come in and bring stuff from outside and show it. But both
so you never know how people affect your life.
He and I, that was our takeaway. Other than I knew I couldn't draw between the lines, I remember that. But other than that, the stuff that the custodian used to teach us. So, but we both walk to school. But then we really only got to, and we were in different classes. So first grade, we went to the Catholic school, Corpus Christi. So we started there first grade. And funny thing is, just coincidentally, Joe's brother, Eric, 10 years later, was in the first kindergarten class of Corpus Christi. So, but at the time they didn't have kindergarten. First grade was the earliest they started. So we were in the first grade, and up until.
So your pets never met in the school itself, or did you see each other in the hallway?
Oh yeah, playing in the courtyard and doing stuff, but nothing on a regular basis. Not enough to hang out, doing stuff. We did similar things, but not together necessarily. So. He tended to hang out with the kids in your class, and and the people's houses you went over. So I don't remember going over his house at that point. Early on, I used to go over other people's house, and Mike and Buzzy and different people, and and those folks. But then there was a point when we did start hanging out together, and I could talk about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So when did that happen? About
third grade, we joined Cub Scouts together. Okay. Now the backstory on that is there was an existing Cub Scout troop in town, Pack 17, more aptly called Stalag 17, but Pack 17. It was these hardcore Cub Scouts. Cub Scouts. And actually, I mean, when it came around, here's the funny thing about it. When the thing came around to join Cub Scouts, I might have had the same experience as others, but we got something probably in school, was handed out. It may have been mailed to the house. Everybody, once you hit a certain, I think it was third grade, you got something in the mail. So I showed up at the at the meeting. There was something in the school cafeteria. I don't know that it was at Corpus Christi necessarily. It might have been some other school in town, one of the public schools. But I basically got rejected. You think everybody
rejected
can
from the Cub Scouts?
Yeah, hard to believe, but
that's very Christian of them.
Yeah, exactly. I remember. I don't know what it was. It might have been some sort of prejudice or whatever. My father didn't speak English very well. He spoke broken English, and I remember showing up, and I remember distinctly the pack leader, this big, relatively. A big guy, let me say, and he had, let's say, a Charlie Chaplin mustache. So that's what he looked like. You wouldn't imagine people at that time. So make your own conclusions. But he had a Charlie Chaplin mustache, and I remember him specifically saying, "This wasn't." How do we know? We said, "Oh, but we got this mail. It says, come join." And he goes, "Well, how do we know you didn't pick this up off the street?" I was like, "What? What do you mean pick it up?" It was like, and so anyway, so Cub Scouts were not for me, according to this guy. So it wasn't. I wasn't worthy. You would think, that's interesting. So fine, went on with my life, and I'm sure it didn't scar me too much, but. Lo and behold, about, 6 months later, who knows what the amount of time was, but, same year, relatively not far after that, we get a call, and it was from a lovely woman who was a den mother, and she was starting remember I told you that was... Stalag 17. Right,
very strict, very established.
Yeah, and the kids used to show up in class and all, and I don't want to say, now you would call it bullying, back then we used to call it going to school, right. that was it. It was just like a regular thing. But
they let people know they were in that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In that that troop.
That troop.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I get this call, or my mom gets a call from this lovely woman who said that she was starting a new den. We were going to be the oldest, or she was just starting it. And looking back, I'm pretty sure her son must have had the same experience. And this woman took it into her hands, good for her, and said, you know, we don't need that one. We'll start our own. So she started, and it was sanctioned by the Boy Scouts, whatever. She probably had to do a lot of legwork and probably spent 6 months doing that. But she had a son who was actually 1 year in the grade ahead of us. He may have been similar age, but it was a grade ahead of us. And he was, I'm sure he got bullied a lot. He was, sort of a Casper milquetoast kid, kid that would, constantly getting picked on.
So she was trying to find an outlet for her son.
Outlet for the son, and
Right.
thought it would be good, and
Like every parent does.
right. And he may have gotten rejected, whatever, as did some others. So so he, the classic definition of Casper milquetoast is talk softly and get hit with a big stick. So that was him. He was bullied. So he was part of the den. This woman started this new pack. Would I like to join? I guess I was one that was available. And then turns out that Joe and Mark, this friend of ours, who I didn't know, he was part of the M to Z, so I wasn't really friends with Mark at the time either. Decided to, we must have gotten the same call, and for whatever reason, we weren't part of this, the NFL troop. We decided to join the AFL troop, and so then we were part of this new pack, as opposed to pack 17, pack 69, much cooler, so we were this new pack. So we were Cub Scouts.
There's a lot of you. So there was enough kids to have this pack. So which was,
well, it started out as this den. I think it grew from then. I think she started it. We were Den 7, and then there was dens after us, subsequent ones,
Okay.
and then it became a big part of our lives. But so we started this den. So basically, at least once a week, and then there were pack meetings after that. But at least once a week, we would go and walk to our den mother's house.
And you'd walk together?
Yeah, well, see, there, that's when it starts. So we would leave after school, and again, we were almost dead center in town, and they lived down, towards that end where Euclid was, but down the hill. Hasbrook Heights, as the name implies, is high. So if you're at the top of the hill down from which the den meetings were, you could actually see the New York skyline. You were up. It was a steep hill. That was Henry Street. So I'll just give you a little history on Henry Street. Henry Street at the time was all cobblestone. Now, hard to believe, but so maybe 64, 65. Couldn't have been more than 66 if we were third grade. So anyway, it was all cobblestone from top to bottom to Route 17. 17 was paved. It wasn't horse and carriages, but 17 was down below. But we were up top. It was all cobblestone with uneven. And I remember that because the whatever car we had at the time, or more of a jalopy, I remember various times coming up from 17. I used to go with my father, who was he was a mason in the construction business, and we used to go, there was a lumber yard at the bottom of Route 17. And more often than once, the truck we had, or the station wagon, one of the old wood panel station wagons, packed with like bricks and cinder blocks and whatever project he was working on at the time, wouldn't make it up the hill. We would go up.
That's a steep hill.
That was a very steep hill. So keep that in mind. It was a steep hill. So we were going up. We'd go up the hill, and then we'd have to shoot off on one of the side streets. Oldfield, I remember, was a street, or side street, and then work our way up and meander so that we could avoid the steep Henry Street. So anyway, so steep hill, got that in mind. Cobblestone, got that in mind. And again, it got paved years later, but at the time, top to bottom, cobblestones. So we would walk from Corpus Christi across, and I'd say probably a half mile, because it wasn't quite to the end of town. Getting close to it, maybe more than a quarter of the way. But then we also had to go, down towards the top of Henry Street, along Terrace Avenue, again a high terrace, high street, Terrace Avenue. So the three of us, Joe, Mark, and myself, would walk to our den meetings. We didn't have backpacks. Backpacks weren't used back then. They were by soldiers and hikers, but not by school kids. We had book bags. So we had our book bags and probably a lunch box. Probably had a snack for the meeting for after school. So here we were, small kids. I showed you my uniform, so we weren't, very big at all. Although size-wise, I was clearly the runt. Joe was, better size, and then Mark was like the tallest kid in the class. He had two older brothers. He knew how to play basketball, and super nice guy. Basically, we used to, play games, and so Cub Scouts was very formative. Helped, thankfully, on my part to those two guys. But we used to walk there. So we'd go to the top of Henry Street, and somebody, I don't know if we were late or just for the heck of it, or probably because it was Joe's idea, we decided to run down the hill. So the first time, I think with the cobblestones, we probably tripped, and but the idea each time was to try to run as fast as we could. So we'd be hurtling down the hill. I think the word's hurtling. Yeah, hurdle is the noun. Hurdle is the verb. We'd be hurtling down the hill, and I think the operative, that's from the derivation of hurt, because it certainly hurt. So we'd be running down the hill. I think we didn't run on the cobblestone. I think there was a sidewalk, because the sidewalk, it may not have been, but there must have been, because there was also a berm. There were like these garden apartments on the side. The den meeting was about 3/4 of the way down the hill, the house, okay, where it was. There was Henry would go down, and then there'd be a side street, but there'd be like a little offshoot here, there's maybe 6 houses, which was perfect, because the meeting was right in the middle of or second or third house there of like whatever it was, the middle. And that street, no one would ever go down there, so we could play in the street and do whatever, play kickball right in that street. So that's what we did. So, but we would each, with our book bags and our lunchbox. I pretty much remember Joe had a Bonanza lunchbox, which got dented because running, falling. So we would run, and the only way to stop would be to throw yourself onto the berm. So we would run. I clearly wouldn't have done this on my own. I grew up. I had 3 older sisters. We didn't do a lot of running or anything like that. We did a lot of reading and watching TV and maybe play acting or whatever. I didn't, but tall Mark and up for anything Joe, we would run down the hill, and then after a while I got the hang of it. But we would throw ourselves down. So here are these 3 kids with their book bags and their lunch boxes running down and then falling on the thing, and we'd probably have to do that like 3 or 4 times before you get to the house down there. So we earned our we'd show up and she'd probably say, what have you guys been doing? But we learned some first aid. We got our merit badges in first aid. So anyway, so we would talk about all these kinds of things, on our walks. Again, we were walking a quarter of a mile, and these are the sorts of things that would come up. Mark also had an inquisitive mind, but Joe was always asking questions, and I'm sure I know, we would talk about, where did this street name come from, and things of that sort. So that was like typical. And I remember we talked. We knew he was good, always good on history. Spent more time on like natural history, and eventually got into that. I was more of the historical place names and stuff, but he was always interested in that. But eventually, there was Corona, New Jersey, became Hasbrook Heights, and then this was the stuff too. At the time, that was part of the curriculum too. We'd learn about stuff. I remember having a specific book on that, and we would talk about stuff like that in Cub Scouts. Cub Scouts was good. It was very important for they wanted to know about your surroundings, and you'd have to write reports and earn a badge on. There was an athletic thing. Like I said, we used to play kickball. We used to go to the CYO. The first time I played basketball was with Joe and Mark. We were at the CYO Center, which was just a little building, but they had a basketball hoop. And we go in there, and I never shot a basketball before. And as far as I knew, I was going to throw it like a baseball. And then
So Joe was all over that, though. Joe.
Yeah. He would right away know this is how you do it, and
Right.
do like that. I guess his kids on his side of the boulevard were much more adept at those things. We didn't do that.
And he had two brothers who were only a year each.
Yeah. So they were probably doing
Right.
doing stuff like that. But I also know in the group on Franklin Avenue, there were some families with brothers, with older boys and stuff. So they were probably, I'm sure one or more of them had basketball hoops and stuff like that. Me, I had never encountered it. So I had to learn how to go a shot for better or worse. I remember things like, kickball, you're the short one, you have to play either second or short. They put, the tall guy at first so he could catch it. So I was in the field and doing things like that. So and then we would have pack meetings, the dreaded Pinewood Derby and all of that. Now the interesting thing about the pack was we had for whatever reason, the original pack leader of 69. It wasn't the Den Mother's husband. He was an airline pilot. I didn't see him much. But it was this other fellow in town for a short period of time. But I think he got transferred or whatever. So they were without a pack master. Lo and behold, Joe's father decides to, or they needed someone, and he stepped up.
Yeah.
It was unlikely. He's very quiet. I don't think I ever heard him say, 2 words before he became packmaster, but he became a packmaster, and he was good. At the time, the Boy Scouts headquarters was in New Brunswick. Somewhere along the line they moved to out in the Midwest, but at the time was New Brunswick. So we used to take trips there and go see the Boy Scout headquarters. I remember it was his father who had arranged that.
Wow.
And we used to go there, and he used to do it, and do all the stuff. The Den Mothers and the Packmasters, they go to training and they'd learn all the different things, and there was Mr. Manueli, who would never hardly say anything, and there he was leading yells and whatever at the things for the pack. And by then we were the oldest, I'm pretty sure, and then there were ones younger than us, and we would also have it at the CYO Center and have meetings there. So those were educational.
You guys became much closer through the Cub Scouts.
Exactly.
The organization.
Yeah, doing stuff there because
Yeah.
we were playing, and then by then we're like hanging out and doing other stuff. And then right around the same time was our first year in Little League, and then we joined probably, most kids join Little League, or boys. Although we had a girl later on, but at the time, all boys joined Little League. And, so we were doing that, and there were, I seem to remember may have been on the same team at some part along the way, but having practices and doing that,
Right.
and then walking to the fields. Again, we didn't get, it's not like now, kids don't get driven. Everything was walking, and then part of these walks, you talk and whatever, and then that's part of the street name. So then that was a whole different direction. So first we were walking in, the direction towards Henry Street and down to Burr and talk about those. Now we were walking the other way, and we would head down, not as far to the one side, but then down the hill again towards Route 17, and then we'd go down the aptly named Ravine Avenue, which was a ravine, and it had all the cutouts on the
So you guys
side.
played on that field. It's like you could see from 17.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Those are the Little League fields, right?
Right.
The high school played at the they called it the athletic field, which was the big one where we used to go to Friday night football games. Hasbrook Heights was notorious for the one town in the county, or one of the few at least, or maybe in the first, that had lights. So they used to play Friday nights under the lights, and that was a big thing to go there. And
Who knew there'd be a series named after them later?
Exactly, but yeah. So, but they were the pioneer in that, and so it was like a big deal to go down there. And then they also had outdoor movies down there, and we'd go down there and see. I remember seeing, obviously, all things for ages and stuff. I remember seeing Counting Floss and a couple of movies or whatever they had, and some slapstick comedy type things, and going down
That
there.
was nice. That was for the community and
Oh
everything.
yeah, very much a community, and in fact, just this past May, we had thankfully a 50-year Corpus Christi reunion. It was somewhat unusual, but there was a group of us decided, let's go ahead and have it from 73. Here it is. It was 2023. Let's have it. And Joe was excited about that. We attended that. Literally had not seen some people in 50 years, because people had gone to, either moved away or gone to, other high schools, went to, just unless you went to Hasbrook Heights High School and we didn't, so you may not have seen those people, or, been in whatever. But there was a good portion that we had not seen in 50 years, and Joe loved that. He ate that up, and just, talking about that, and he would call me afterwards and we'd talk about that, because we didn't hang out that night together. We talked to different people, and he told me people he talked to, and I told him about the people I talked to, and he loved that. And then fortunately, a lot of people, when we told them about Joe's passing, they were like, "Wow, I'm really glad we got to see him," and had that last opportunity to see him at the reunion, and they passed along their condolences and said, and in some cases, memories of him. So that was a great thing. So
If nothing else, Joe, I mean, just as an aside, Joe
Sure.
just seemed to be always an outgoing person.
Yeah.
He was always had fun being out with people, and people were attracted to him. Like, he just had that kind of personality, I guess.
yeah, and that's the kind of feedback I got from people. They were like, "Oh, Joe was always, you saw him, you'd smile when you saw him coming, he never." One person told me, "Oh, there's two types of people in the world. Those you're happy to see coming, and those you could care less." He goes, "He was one you'd put a smile on your face, and it would be always positive, never anything bad to say about people. I wish I could be like that. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to." He would, he was talking to everybody. Everybody was happy to see him. So he was always positive and always looking at the good side of people, and people fed off of that.
Right.
So so that's very much the case, and people were pretty much unanimous, and that's the kind of feedback I got from them. Like, Joe was always so happy and full of life.
Yeah,
And
I know from personal interactions with him and stuff like that, since we were friends, but he always made you feel welcome immediately, no matter if it was a year you hadn't seen him or a shorter time. He was somewhere, wherever, a restaurant, bar, whatever, and he would just have this gigantic smile on his face, open his arms, and call your name out, and it was like you just felt like you had seen him the day before.
Yeah.
You know, there was no time in between, and you just took right up in conversation. And I don't think I've ever had a cross word with him. I mean, I've fought with a lot of people. I'm a usually ornery person.
Yeah.
But I don't think I ever had a bad word with him.
Yeah, same. I mean, I knew him for 60 years, and we were ultra competitive. I'll talk about later about, you know, different sports and games we played and games we made up, you know, in an effort to beat the other person and different things we did. But it was always, you know, good-natured, and then, you know, we would, you know, not be, you know, mad or anything, you know, a lot of stuff. I mean, which is not the case with, you know, a lot of people. You know, you just move on. Some people, you know, and there'd be fights on the
Right. Even
on the field.
even
And
your
so,
best friend, sometimes you have a disagreement with, or you have some
Yeah.
kind of, you know, something doesn't meet eye to eye.
yeah,
But with him, it just seemed to always like fall
We
off
roll
his
off
back.
him. Yeah,
roll
exactly.
right off of him, and you just go forward and just continue.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, that's how I always took it.
Yeah, and that's the case. I mean, and that, yeah, I mean that's the case. And like I said, these people who had not seen him in 50 years and knew him from grade school, that was the same view of him that they had. I mean, he was a kid then, but he was a kid right, you know, to the end.
No, he's
I mean,
always a kid.
He was always a kid, and always had a, you know, youthful. And he was great with kids. I mean, we saw when we were at at the services, his nieces and nephews
yeah.
and all, they were all like, you know.
Yeah, he had this inner exuberance. It wasn't that he wasn't an adult. It wasn't that he wasn't mature, but he always had this kid-like way of looking at everything
Yeah.
and having fun with it.
Right, and that was part of also the inquisitiveness. That he was always interested. I mean, I would get into, as you could hear already, you know, maybe some minutia of stuff and all, but he would never say like, who cares? He'd be interested.
Right.
You know, he'd either, you know, laugh at something that I thought was fun, you know, made a joke about it, or want to know more. And then, I mean, this, I'm kind of rambling, but that's sort of how we used to have our conversations. You know, one thing, and then one thing would lead to another thing, and then, you know, we would go off on tangents, and then he would tell me about something else, or that reminded him of something else, or, you know, the same. So when we, you know, would walk to these things together, and then later on when we went on, you know, runs together and camping trips together and all that, you know, a lot of back and forth on, you know, myriad of topics. So, you know, you know.
So you guys clicked on a lot of things, obviously.
Yeah. We were both, interested, inquisitive, wanted to learn more. Always had a love of learning, and so then that was clear. And then, like I said, Cub Scouts was probably it was a watershed moment. So, you know, we hung out a lot together, and then through Cub Scouts, I mean, like I said, we used to have a great thing back then in Heights. There were at least, you know, you say sandlots. There were a few selected open fields. I mean, later on, which I'll talk about later, we went to Garfield and we play on an actual field. In Heights, there were like open areas where, you know, young kids would just gather and play anything from wiffle ball to tackle football, mostly tackle football. On where I lived on Kip Avenue, there was the big sirens, used to call them the horns, that would go off when, you know, when the school was off or when they had to call an ambulance. And where the horns was, and now there's a house there, unfortunately, but I don't think there's any open space yet left, but there was an area, and that was one of the playing fields. Another one was in front of Mark's house, right on the boulevard, which is now a bank or something or other. But there was a big, you know, like a double lot that was there, which is now a bank and a parking lot. But there was a big double lot right where he lived, and we used to gather there. So once we were, together in Cub Scouts, we used to go there, and there used to be, games, and I remember Mark's brothers were there, and they'd be playing, and we'd be blocking or whatever, and it's probably, it's where I learned about the at the time, who were the good teams and stuff, and then. I never knew, to follow any of that, but they would talk about football and this team and that team.
So was he always a Green Bay Packer fan from back then, or was that later on?
Yeah, as far as I can remember. Bear in mind, the Packers were the team in...
right, because they won Super Bowl after Super Bowl. Yeah.
Well, the first two Super Bowls, 66, 67. But the reason Joe and a lot of the folks we know in Garfield were... Packer fans were basically Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi was a Jersey guy, coached at St. Cecilia's. People knew him, so he was like a local guy, made good. Went on to coach, I think he coached at West Point, but he had his roots in our area, Inglewood, and he coached in there, and he was Italian, so hey, so
what more can you want?
What more could you want? So he went and he coached the Packers. So as a result, a lot of the fathers who were football fans, obviously were all rooted for the Packers. So those who watch football, the kids who watch it with their fathers became Packers fans. My father didn't follow football, so I never watched a football game until I think probably I don't even think I saw the Jets win the Super Bowl. I remember listening on the radio and then hearing today, the next day, and whatever. So I was free to find my own teams, but the ones who were either had older brothers or had fathers. Packers were a natural team to commit to, and then the same with the Yankees. Again, the Yankees were the great team, at least up until the early '60s at the time, until they came back. But again, they had DiMaggio, Rizzuto, Lazzari. What do they have in common? They were all Italian, so they're another reason to root for the Yankees, and they were the best team at the time. So Joe was a committed Yankees and Packers fan for as long as I could remember. I sort of had a streak going the other way, so I became Jets and Mets, and that was a long-standing friendly feud between us, and there were times when the Mets and Jets won far too few, unfortunately, and much more when the Packers or the Giants, we each didn't mind the Giants. Giants were a local team, so that was fine when the Giants won. But Yankees had, their great time, so that was when we were both in college, so we used to, give each other the business, or more often him give me the business, because the Yankees were winning. That's when they won back-to-back in the late '70s. So yeah, Joe was always a Packers fan, had the Packers paraphernalia, and then when we played on the sandlots, would have a Packers hat or a Packers shirt, yeah, that was his team, and those guys were the ones that we would say, oh, this is like Nitschke or whatever, and then that continued right through. We used to watch Super Bowls together, and remember the one when they won again with Favre, and his family was at my house, and we saw the Packers win, and that was enjoyable. I think they beat the Patriots, which has made it even more enjoyable. So, but yeah, to answer your question, yeah, Joe was always a Packers fan. That's a little bit of the backstory there, But yeah, the sandlots I was talking about. Yeah, there was a number of them. There was also there's something called the Circle in Madison, where I live now, in Hasbrook Heights, and not on the Circle itself, but just off to the ways there was like a little war memorial, and that was a little field where you could play on there. They were scattered through town, so there wasn't any lot that we didn't play at one point or another. So. Yeah, so that was the only organized sport that we did was Little League. and we did that, straight on through. And we would walk down to the fields. Like I said, the athletic field with the Friday night games were right on 17, and then adjacent to them was the two little league fields, the majors and the minors, and we played on that, and that was right up until high school.
Okay, so let's take a little break.
Sounds good.
All right. Welcome back to More Joe Than You Need to Know with my friend Ernie, and I'm Peter, and I guess we're going to continue now. Ernie's covered a lot of the early years between the two of them, and I guess now we're up to almost high school, right?
Yeah, so Corpus Christi, it was a long time together, 8 years. Like I said, got to know Joe best through Cub Scouts and hanging out. In that context, I pretty much started playing sports. We joined Little League together. We were, competitive. We were always playing against each other. Same group of people. I remember remember 8 years. It's a long time. By the time we finished 8th grade, my basement had become a place where we got out our aggressions, or our competitive streak really showed itself. I had an old pool table which really couldn't be used as a pool table anymore. It was kind of warped, so my father had put a piece of plywood on it, so it became a ping pong table, and we had some marathon ping pong matches over the years. Those became. We would play on and on. I think I mentioned before. We were pretty competitive. If I remember right, I would win like 2 out of 3 games, but it would go on, and Joe would never want to give up, and we would actually say, okay, best 3 out of 5, best 5 out of 7, and I have a recollection at one point we said, best 50 out of 99. We would go on, and then we actually, I think that morphed into another game. Where Joe was more likely to win, which was like a ping pong, hockey, racquetball sort of game, where we had a little tunnel area in my basement where the ping pong table was on one side, the wall was on the other side, and there was a closet at the end, and the object was to hit the ping. The one person would act as the goalie, the other person had the ball, and you try to score off that. Now, it involved body checking and being able to knock the paddle out of the person's hand or something. So that one, Joe probably, I'm sure, beat me 2 out of 3 times in that. So we used to alternate between the two on that. But so that was towards the end of our time at Corpus Christi, and then Joe actually remembered why we ended up. I was like, how did you and I and a dozen other kids from Heights end up going to Paramus Catholic? And he actually remembered. After he said it, I remembered somebody, and he actually remembered the people. There was somebody a grade ahead of us from our school who was a freshman and came in. Great move, marketing part on Paramus Catholic. They came to our school, and they talked and said how great it was and come join. Plus, buddies of mine, like one of my best friends growing up, his older brothers had gone there, and they raved about it. So for all those reasons, we ended up going to Paramus Catholic, which was a regional school. So instead of walking to it, we'd have to take the bus, which we did the first year. There were times it was too far to walk. I remember not in the morning, but coming home at times. We actually used to hitchhike sometimes, and that was 1973. So it was done back then. So I remember he and I hitchhiking back from Paramus Catholic probably a half dozen times, when either we had done stuff after school and missed the bus or whatever. But otherwise, we'd take the 35 bus back and forth to Paramus Catholic. And once we were there, that's pretty much how we got to know the group of guys that we maintained friendships with all these years, Peter included, and a group of guys pretty much. We were in Heights. Me, Joe, Pete was another one, a different Pete, and then there were guys in Lodi, Saddlebrook, and Garfield. Now, for whatever reason, maybe because they had the best fields, or more likely because they were the most unwilling to move more than
We were the laziest.
the laziest. We could have said, "Come to our." Well, I'm sure we have fields, but
Yeah,
they
but
were
it's
like,
true,
"No,
everybody-
we're good here. You come visit
Yeah,
us."
everybody came down over here.
Exactly. So Joe and I think Pete had a paper route after school every day. So I don't think he used to come, but
I don't remember him at a game at all.
yeah. So I think he was. I remember him for having a long-standing paper route, and I had one on and off, but I never had one that I had to commit to every day. But so Joe and I used to ride our bikes to Garfield. Now, again, back in the topography of things, Heights was here, so the first part was nice. It was a nice downhill into Lodi. We would cut through Lodi and then go across, and then we would make our way to Garfield. Garfield, also up high. The topography is like there's a Lodi's a valley in between, so it always gets flooded. And then Garfield up on a hill. So we would ride our bikes, and I remember, what was it, First Street?
First Street, yeah. First Street.
First Street, going up First Street all the time, just past the Lodi's Boys Club, where I had spent, done some stuff. I had my first camping trip and a lot of other things at Lodi's Boys Club. Joe never, I don't remember him going to Lodi's Boys Club. He did, he was the other I think he actually went into, he did most of his camping with the Boy Scouts after, let me just digress a little bit. Cub Scouts, we went through Cub Scouts. I tell you, it was very, instructive, very formative. The den mother, and actually I didn't mention this, in addition to Mr. Manueli, Mrs. Manueli was like the assistant den mother, and I think she became a den mother for Joe's older brothers, or excuse me, younger brothers, after us. But she was like the assistant and helped out, and was also at a number of the den meetings.
I'm sure Joe's father was worn out after you guys.
Well, he could have been. I don't know how long he was pack master as long as I was there, and then Mark's father was also, I think, after Cub Scouts, the transitions into Weeblos, will be Loyal Scouts. So it's like the next thing for the older. We did that, and the three of us, I remember. Being Weeblos, and Mark's father was very intent. Joe's father was very intent on us being getting awarded the highest honor in Weeblos. It's like the Boy Scout, Eagle Scout, but it's the Weeblos Parveli Dei, Children of God. It's for Catholic award. And we spent lots of times, we wrote compositions, we had to do this and that, we had to kiss the Monsignor's ring, all sorts of stuff. So whatever, we had to do, and we eventually got the award. But that was a big deal, it was a ceremony and all that, and I remember the three of us doing that. So that was that was like the culmination. And I think, like I said, I think Joe became a Boy Scout. I didn't, at that point I had enough. I saw the Boy Scouts, and I saw that they were literally wearing brown shirts, so I was like, no, it's not for me. So I'm not going to be a Boy Scout. So I moved on. So I think that's when I started doing stuff with the Boys Club, and I went on camping trips and did stuff like that. Joe was doing that with the Boy Scouts at the time. But so back to the.
So you're up the hill with the bike.
Up the hill. We're going up the hill.
You're going up the hill with the bike.
So we go up the hill. So we would pass by the like the Garfield social clubs. There was the characters. They would see us going up there every day. We would shout out something. There was a guy named Rubber. We used to yell out to him, and he would yell back, and we would go up. And then on the way back, it was the opposite. But we would go, and we would come here to Century Field in Garfield, which is big open field, and we would meet with the guys from those other towns.
Yeah.
And
it
we
used
would
to be
play.
a big dirt field. Now it's very modernized with the green acres, and it's got
Yeah.
It was back then. It was just dust and dirt.
A big dirt field.
Yeah.
And that's what we played on. So we were there, and we would play close to every day after school, and we would play tackle football. Choose up sides and whatever. Now the takeaway from that was invariably Joe's shirt would get ripped.
Every single time.
Yeah.
It was.
I mean, it was tackle, and I think the idea was that other people would get tackled. They would know he would not. He would keep his legs churning. He would not want to go down and like try to carry. He was like before Mark Bavaro keeping 5 guys on his back and like running, and people would like be pulling him or whatever, and his shirt would rip to the point that he would show up at games and say, "This shirt will not rip." It ripped.
It ripped.
It ripped. And then and also he would always say on the way home, he would say, "Oh, my mother's gonna kill me. I ripped my shirt again." Of course, she didn't kill him. She would dutifully sew it up or get another shirt or whatever. But he'd always say, "Oh," and be like all mad or fuming or feign that he was mad. But it was always ripped. So he'd always come home with a ripped shirt, and we'd go back the next day with either a sewn up shirt or a new shirt, or made out of special material, whatever.
And
but
typically making the statement, "This shirt will not rip."
this shirt will not rip, and it always ripped. It always got torn off of him because people were trying to get down in the games, and they was some, these were tackle games. I don't remember anybody getting hurt other than scraped up knees and.
Yeah, surprisingly, no one got hurt.
Yeah, because we would tackle and
they were fun. Yeah.
And it was fun games, but there was a lot of bonding. And I think how we got to that point was at Promise Catholic. We just sort of a group of us sort of just clicked. We were spread out over a couple of different homerooms, so we weren't necessarily all in the same class, but we. I think at the lunch table we all sort of gravitated towards one another, and had common interests and talked about things, and not necessarily stuff about the towns, but at that point we're all into sports or whatever, but like the idea of the camaraderie and the interplay of who were the Mets fans and Yankees fans and whatever, and back and forth, and then started playing, and once you're on the field and competitive, and in addition to that, we'd occasionally shoot hoops together and do that sort of thing. But
and there were tennis courts down there too. We used to play. I don't know if you.
Yeah.
I think you used to play.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So well, whatever was. Available. I mean, we of course tennis courts at Garfield because he wouldn't come. He wouldn't come to the ones in Heights. But so we would ride our bikes there, and with the tennis rackets, and go there and play. And then some of the guys were on different teams. I know Joe was on freshman football, and some of the other guys were on football together. So I was tennis, and other people. Were track and various things, so people knew each other, but we started hanging out together. And then during the summer, this same group of us that played tackle football together, or whatever, tennis or whatever we the sport of the season was, we put together a softball team. So we started playing softball, and that would be either in I remember playing on a hilltop, which is on the bottom of the hill in Lodi, or some other fields, and we would play other groups of guys and other high school guys, and did pretty well, and or had fun regardless. That's all we needed. That was enough of it. But we would play, and we would have fun, and I guess eventually go out for beers afterwards and all. But Or
Yeah, we were too young for beers back then, I think.
oh yeah, well 18. 18. Well, once we turned 18.
Once we turned 18,
Yeah,
but yeah,
all
in
right.
high
Well,
school.
we went out for Italian ice.
Italian ice, yeah, there's Italian ice.
Italian ice in Garfield.
And-
So advantage of being in Garfield, Clyde's Italian ice.
There you go.
So we did that, and then we got to the point we actually named our team and got T-shirts made up, and the name of the team was Joe's Boys. Now, my recollection, which I think is the accurate recollection, is that the genesis of the name was a summer at Joe's house. Parents were away, and we were shooting fireworks.
Yes.
Exactly. Shooting fireworks from Joe's backyard. Now, it so happens that his house on Franklin Avenue was just enough in from the boulevard, or maybe not quite enough in from the boulevard, that you could shoot a bottle rocket and it would make its way to the boulevard. Shooting fireworks like that, again, it was on or about probably before 4th of July, but, fireworks before they were legally, sold legally, but, bottle rockets and, the firecrackers and those things were commonly, found. So we were shooting those. And then, lo and behold...
and the bottle tipped.
Oh, was that it?
I think, or something like that.
Yeah, so they were going where they were supposed to go. And then one of them didn't quite go the way... as most sad stories start, it didn't happen the way it was supposed to go. So whatever it was in, the bottle rocket was in a bottle, and the bottle tipped and it went and hit the building that it wasn't supposed to. Nothing caught on fire, but whoever it was had had enough and complained and probably got upset when the bottle, instead of just making a noise, hit into the window. So made a call to the Hasbrook Heights police. So again, this is all by way of the origin of Joe's Boys, the name. So
but somehow Joe sensed that there was going to be trouble.
yeah, I think we heard sirens.
He was no stranger to trouble.
No stranger to trouble. As we learned when the police were knocking on the door and say, "Joe, we know you're in there." so it was no surprise to them either.
Right.
So both Joe and the local constables had an idea that trouble was brewing.
But to Joe's credit, he had a repertoire of actions he could take when this would occur. Because he said, let's do the shower trick.
Right.
To which
no one
knew what the shower trick was.
Right. Well, the shower trick, it turns out, as we all know now, involved Joe going to the bathroom, and everybody else was just like looking around, what do we do? I think the savvy folks from Hasbrook Heights hid so that they weren't seen, but these rubes from Lodi and Garfield, they were just, sort of wandering around, like bouncing off the walls, like, what do we do? What do we do?
Plus, we had probably had a few beers or something.
Probably, yeah, although, yeah, that sure. So, Joe, apparently the shower trick involved going to the shower and acting as if you just came out of the shower, so I don't know what's going on. It
couldn't possibly have been him.
No, it couldn't have possibly been him. So Joe goes to the shower, which I think was upstairs.
Yes.
So he went upstairs, took his clothes off, presumably, and jumped in the shower, got all wet, came back with a towel wrapped around his waist, and then... strangely, for like a 18-year-old kid, you only see this in shampoo commercials, with a towel on his head. Because how often does a 18-year-old boy wrap a towel around his head? But if you're doing the shower trick, it's all part of
the shower trick.
Exactly.
Yeah, mandatory dress.
Right. 2 towels. So the cops are knocking on the door. Joe, we know you're in there. Who else is there? So they knock on the door. Joe opens it up. He's like rubbing his hair, like, what? I was in the shower. What's the problem, officer? And
Officer Delaney.
I was it Delaney? Could have been. Yes, if I could do an Irish accent, I would. But picture this in an Irish accent. But I heard this, but I was hiding in the kitchen. I knew where they wouldn't be seen, so I was hiding. I hear it, but I wasn't one of the ones, like a molecule bouncing off the walls or whatever. So Joe's there, and they go, Joe, the parents here? No, my parents are away. Well, who's here? Is it you? I'm here by myself. And then all of a sudden, one person shows, oh, and him.
Well, someone fell out of the closet.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, real slick. All right, someone fell out. Okay, someone fell out of the closet. I didn't know that. I could hear things. I hear commotion. And so I hear Joe say, oh, just him, and him, and him.
Yeah,
just
more people would stumble or something.
Right, or
would
stumble, or somebody thing, it was dominoes effect, different people, and Joe said, just me and my boys, and then the offer, and so obviously that stuck, but so the officer, nothing happened. He was like, well, there's been some reports of, again, a perfect Irish accent, even though they probably weren't Irish. But this officer saying, the reports, just make sure it's not you or whatever, it doesn't happen. And it was like, oh, no, sure, yeah, boy. And, that's crazy. I'm sure, yeah, whoever it is, I hope you get him. and then he went on. And then, life went on. But from
The name
henceforth,
stuck.
we were Joe's boys.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can remember spending some vacation time down with the Manuelis down in Long Beach Island. They had a house that was right on the strip there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
my
big porch.
Yeah, my Long Beach Island was later on. I ran the length of. They used to have a run in October, and I did the. I think 3 times, because at least 3 times, because once it was brutally hot. And it was like in October, and it was like an Indian summer day, and depending on which year it was, you either ran from the one tip up to the Barnegat Light, or you ran the opposite way.
That's a long
and
run.
18 miles.
Yeah.
And Joe and I did that, I think 3 times. The first time we did it, you took a bus. It was like sponsored at a church, and you took a bus there. And the buses were like backed up. It was a mess, and we weren't going to be there in time for the starting gun. So we decided to jump off the bus and run like 2 miles to get to the starting line. And we see people passing because it was already because the buses got backed up, or there was a problem. There weren't enough buses, so we ran 2 miles there, and then we were like at the end of the pile by the whole crowd. The pile of people, the crowd, by the time we got to the back, so we were, towards the end. So our 18 turned into 22, but so we ran,
Wow.
and that was when it went, and he ended up at Barnegat Light. So that was at LBI. Joe loved the, going on the water. The thing is, I'm not a water person, but he would love fishing and doing all that sort of stuff.
It's funny. I hadn't thought of it before now, but if you look at that picture up there, let's see if I can get it. Let's see, where is it? Over here. I took those photos with Joe, actually.
Ah.
The ones with the sand dune and because they're on Long Beach Island State Park.
Yeah, there's Old Marnie.
And there's Old Marnie, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny how the group of us, did stuff together and all. I mean, we were all born in 1959, which historically, and this is something Joe knew about and was kind of stuff we would talk about and be like of interest. Not that anybody else cares, but the years when we were born. February for myself, February for Joe, June for myself, and May for you.
And Bernie is in May.
Yeah, bunch of the guys.
Tom is in June. There's a bunch of people.
Right, exactly. All in that. For those people born between early January, it's like January 3rd, I think. Again, not interest. Go get a sandwich if you're not interested. But for those who have historical interest, Alaska was admitted to the Union in early January 1959. So there had been 48 states since like 1912 or something, Arizona, until 1959. And then it's kind of like the popes, and then one died quickly, and then the August of 1959, Hawaii was admitted to the Union. So it became 50 states. But if you were born between January and August, there were 49 states on the flag. There probably aren't many such flags out there, and it's sort of an odd configuration.
Right.
But each of us in this group that we hung out together, if you were born, there were a few outliers probably, but if there were any born between those months, as the three of us were, or you could call us the 49ers, because it was when there were 49 states on the U.S. flag.
Never knew that before, but it's pretty unique, actually. Yeah.
Not many.
Because before that, like you said, there was either, it was 48, and after that there was 50. So
and it was only 8 months.
It was only 8 months. Yeah.
8 months if you were born during that period. So there's something,
that explains a lot.
It could be something like with the stars are aligned. The stars were uneven in that during that time period.
Quite a lot.
There you go. Now it's all making sense. Well, there you go. Okay, so if you come back with your sandwich, we could resume.
Sounds good. So we will hopefully come back with another part soon.
Right, and hopefully you'll come back to listen.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.